The first operations of this group were to blow up an enemy train near Sheikh Zuweid, then blow up the ammunition stores that our forces had left behind when they withdrew from the battles of 1967. After these two successful operations, Ibrahim received a letter of thanks from the Minister of War for the effort he had made in leading the group. Over time, the group led by Ibrahim Al-Rifai grew, and joining it became an honor sought by many members of the armed forces. Successful operations increased, and the group's soldiers set foot in many areas inside Sinai, so choosing a name for this group became necessary. Indeed, the group was given the name Group 39 Combat, starting on July 25, 1969. Martyr Ibrahim Al-Rifai chose the tiger's head logo as a symbol for the group, which is the same logo that Martyr Ahmed Abdulaziz adopted during the battles of 1948. The group's fire was the first Egyptian fire to be fired in Sinai after the 1967 setback, and its operations became a source of fear for the Israeli enemy, individuals, and equipment. At the end of each operation, Ibrahim seemed happy and eager for a new operation. He and his group blew up a train of Israeli soldiers and officers in the Sheikh Zuweid area. After that, a decision was issued by the Egyptian leadership to blow up the ammunition stores left behind by the Egyptian forces during the withdrawal. The success of this operation was a figment of the imagination, or almost impossible. But Al-Rifai and his men managed to reach them and blow them up, so that the fires remained burning in those warehouses for 3 consecutive days. In early 1968, Israel deployed a group of surface-to-surface missiles to abort any Egyptian troop buildup. Although Israel was strict in hiding these missiles with all means of camouflage and deception, reconnaissance units discovered many of them along the front line. At that time, Lieutenant General Abdul-Munim Riad did not know the taste of sleep or rest in his battle that he had begun to rebuild the Egyptian armed forces. So he immediately sent a message to Ibrahim Al-Rifai. The request was clear and urgent. Israel has deployed missiles on the East Bank. We want missiles from them, Al-Rifai. The Chief of Staff's words ended, and Al-Rifai turned into a burning ember. Only a few days passed during which Ibrahim Al-Rifai and his men did not sleep. As much as they perfected the planning, they perfected the execution. Al-Rifai did not leave anything to chance or accept failure. His men were soldiers of steel, forged through battles and hardships. They worked tirelessly, their eyes bloodshot, their minds focused with surgical precision on the task at hand. Every obstacle was a challenge met with unwavering determination. The night of the mission was dark and silent. Al-Rifai and his men approached the missile site with the stealth of shadows. Moving in synchrony, they executed their plan flawlessly. Heartbeats matched the ticking of the clock, as each second could mean the difference between life and death. With a series of calculated moves, they neutralized the guards and secured the missiles. For a brief moment, the world seemed to hold its breath as the explosives were carefully set. In the silent explosion of light, the men vanished into the night, leaving no trace behind. They returned with the precious cargo, Israeli missiles, secured at great risk. The mission was a success. Lieutenant General Riad received the missiles with profound relief and respect for the team's bravery. The data gathered on the enemy's weaponry was invaluable. It provided insights that could save countless lives. Al-Rifai and his men had risked everything, and their courage had paved the way for future victories. From that day, the name Ibrahim Al-Rifai became synonymous with impossible missions accomplished. The Egyptian armed forces were stronger, more prepared, and more determined than ever, ready to face any challenge that lay ahead. The amazing success of the daring operation was that his men crossed the Suez Canal, and with Al-Rifai's lightning-fast style, he was able to return with 3 missiles. This operation caused a huge uproar in Egyptian and Israeli circles alike, until the Israeli commander responsible for the missile bases was removed. Lieutenant General Abdul-Munim Riad described this operation by saying, It was one of the dangerous missions in the wars, and also one of the prominent operations associated with Al-Rifai's name when he crossed behind enemy lines in the dead of night. He succeeded in capturing an Israeli soldier and returned with him to the west of the canal. This prisoner was Lieutenant Danny Shamoun, the wrestling champion in the Israeli army, but Al-Rifai took him to the heart of Cairo without a single scratch. Al-Rifai's successful operations continued until they created an Egyptian public opinion that the Egyptian forces are capable of crossing and causing damage to the Israeli army, and it even spread terror in the hearts of the Israelis, so they called Al-Rifai and his men the Ghost Group. On the morning of the martyrdom of Lieutenant General Riad, Abdel Nasser requested a quick response so that the morale of the Egyptian army would not be affected by the martyrdom of its commander. Al-Rifai crossed the canal and with his men occupied the position of Al-Majid 6, from which the shells that caused the martyrdom of Lieutenant General Riad were fired, and he annihilated all the officers and soldiers who were in the position, numbering 44 Israeli elements. Israel, due to the horror and enormity of this operation, even submitted a protest to the Security Council on March 9, 1969, stating that their soldiers were brutally killed. Al-Rifai did not stop there, but raised the Egyptian flag on the wreckage of Al-Majid 6 after its destruction. This flag was flying for the first time over the occupied sector since 1967 and remained raised for nearly 3 months. The news of him and his terrible group was transmitted by the armed forces units. His crossing was not the news, but his return was always a surprise. After every successful raid by his group, the Egyptian eavesdropping devices would pick up the enemy's screams and the cries of his soldiers. Once, while he was returning from a new raid, an intelligence officer gave him a gift, a tape recording full of the enemy's cries for help and the screams of his soldiers like women. With the advent of August 1970, voices began to rise in many parts of the world calling for peace, while Al-Rifai was setting new training programs and drawing up plans for the attack. They were talking about peace, and he and his men were preparing for war. He was emphasizing that the only way to regain land and dignity was to fight. He was certain that the battle was coming, and he had to prepare his men awaiting the expected battle. The martyr's intuition was right, and the glorious battle of October 6th began. With the first air strike and the cries of "God is great," the commando battalion led by the hero set off. A few hours before the first airstrikes, he and his squad entered to destroy what was called the Abu Jamis cannons in Ain Musa, then in 3 helicopters to destroy the oil wells in the Balim area east of the canal to deprive the enemy of benefiting from them. The men succeeded in carrying out the mission,